Another week, another Los Angeles team load managing against the Phoenix Suns, and another win for the Phoenix Suns, 130-104. On today's episode of Locked On Suns, we'll break down why the Suns beat the Lakers, Chris Paul's big-time 28-point night, and more on a post-game edition of Locked On Suns. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 6 seasons and a writer at Suns.com and Dime Magazine. Thank you all for making Locked On Suns your first listen here on this Tuesday. Back-to-back, another game tonight. Thank you for checking in. If you're finding us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you are, we are. If you like what you're hearing, we're here for you every single Monday through Friday, so go ahead and hit that follow button or that subscribe button wherever you might be finding the show. If you're on YouTube, hit the bell down below, get a notification when we go live as well, and drop a comment down below in the comments section with your thoughts on today's win over the Los Angeles Lakers. No Devin Booker for the Suns. A sore groin was what he was diagnosed with. And then on the opposite side, no Russell Westbrook, no LeBron James, and no Anthony Davis, who might be out for quite a while here with a foot injury. All that to say, a win nonetheless, 130-104. We'll start with the moment of the game, which is actually 2 today, and then we'll get into the takeaways from today's game, all right? The moments, in this case, plural, one in the first quarter, one in the fourth quarter, and they both had to do with Chris Paul. So, in the first quarter, you basically have from about the 8-minute mark or so, 7:57 to be specific, is Chris Paul's first elbow jumper of the night, 15-footer right from the right elbow where he loves to take them. Goes on to get to the free throw line twice in the next few minutes and then makes a layup at the 5:03 mark. So basically that stretch, you could even add on, he made another elbow jumper a few seconds later. That was a little burst in the first quarter. And then in the fourth quarter, he had another burst, really to close the game out. And that one started at the 6:35 mark. He had a step-back jumper, 10-footer. I believe it was along the right baseline, if I'm thinking of the correct shot. He had another one at 6:04, and then he had another one at 5:37, and then he made a deep three at the 5-minute mark to put the Suns up 24 to really end any idea of a run by the Lakers, and then he checked out for the rest of the game. Only played 31 minutes. So it was those 2 stints. He really brought it early and brought it late to close things out. And it's just a symbol of his aggressiveness, right? That's the big thing for me that we saw in those stretches and that we saw in this game overall. A season-high 28 points for Chris Paul. He was 9 of 18 from the field, 8 assists, 0 turnovers. There were so many of these games the first 2 years with Chris Paul, right? The one I always think back to personally is partially, I think, because it was another game where Booker didn't play. I think it was in March of Chris Paul's first season here, and it was another one just like this where it was no Booker, but I believe everyone else was healthy, and it was just drive and kick, like high pick and roll with Chris Paul. Either he's going to score or he's going to get it to a shooter. We'll talk about the Suns shooting tonight to close out the show today because it was a very similar recipe in this game. And especially back in that March 2021 Pelicans game, you just saw Paul take over in the fourth quarter. It was a sign of how the clutch time stuff was going to go with Chris Paul here. It was a sign of how much he was going to elevate the role players. And this felt like that. All right, 28-8, 4 rebounds, whatever you want to ascribe that to. Point being, he brought it, and he was aggressive, and he was assertive, and he had control over the game in a way that we just have not seen this year. All right. And beyond the aggressiveness, it's one thing to have the mentality. It's the other thing to be able to physically do it. Now, I think Eddie Johnson was very eager to describe this game as a major stepping stone for CP. I don't know if I'm going to go there. I do feel like he was pretty solid against the Pelicans on Saturday night as well. You can listen to Monday's show on this feed to hear my thoughts there. I think he made the right plays, but really he was mostly a spot-up shooter in that game, whereas tonight it was more vintage, normal Chris Paul that we're used to seeing. But again, it's one thing to have the mindset. It's another thing to do it. I'm not all the way where Eddie Johnson is, that this was him playing his way into shape and he's finally feeling it and on and on. I don't want to do that after one game. But I think you can't argue that we saw physical attributes that just hadn't been there from him either. In addition to that mindset, he was like Patrick Beverley was up to his normal shenanigans, not getting into fights with anybody this time around or ejected or technicals or any of the extensive stuff that we've seen him do. But he was chirping, he was getting into the game the way he always does, and he had one play where he didn't like the foul call or it was like a physicality back and forth, and then the ball went out of bounds, I think, and Beverly's telling the ref he doesn't agree with the call, and then Chris Paul just kind of stone-faced, and then Patrick Beverley comes and smacks him on the butt a little bit, and then Chris just like rolls his eyes and keeps it moving. Beverley was doing that despite the fact that Chris Paul was getting past Beverley on the perimeter every single play, it felt like. Schroeder was the same way. Basically, the Lakers couldn't keep Chris Paul in front of them. If you forgot, Chris Paul's 37 years old. So I thought it was pretty impressive that he was able to have that first step, that burst, that was able to get himself into the paint. He took 10 shots in the paint tonight. I think this is maybe an opportunity to highlight that he wasn't awesome in terms of efficiency tonight. He was 4 of 10 in the paint. He only really got to the basket once, which, that's normal. But even on those mid-range jumpers, he was only 3 of 6, 50%. That's fine. But this was, again, not a takeover, not a, wow, Chris Paul has arrived. I'm not doing that today. But again, he was getting into the paint. He was playing with an assertive mindset. And he was in control of everything going on in a way that we just haven't seen a lot. We'll talk about the shooting again to close things out, but that's what the beginning of the game and the end of the game showed me that I wasn't sure we would get. Devin Booker being out tonight, you could have obviously seen this be another McHale game like the Rockets matchup was last week, or Deandre Ayton returned. Do they just try to feed him and give him opportunities to create? No, this was very much like what we've seen from Chris Paul time and again, his whole career, but especially since he got here, where he's going to go out there with role players and he's going to pick and roll you into the dirt and he's going to win. And he did that. And he hasn't done that a lot this year. So very, very promising. And we'll see where it goes from here. I want to do a takeaway. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to give you 2 takeaways of the game, starting with why we shouldn't overlook or come to normalize Deandre Ayton's steady, consistent, solid play. We'll talk about that next. First, today's show, guys, brought to you by Turo. Turo is the world's largest car-sharing marketplace, and with Turo, you can book any car you want, wherever you want it, from a community of local hosts. Browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion in the United States, UK, Canada, and Australia. You can book, let's say, a spacious SUV or minivan for a family road trip, a classic luxury car for a special event or holiday, an affordable economy car if you're on a budget and just need to get from point A to point B, or you can test drive that new electric vehicle you've had your eye on to see how it fits in your everyday life. Many Turo hosts can even deliver the car right to you to make things even easier. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms, conditions, and exclusions apply, so forget boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo.com. Alrighty, so we did our moment of the game. Let's get to our takeaways of the game here. And I think first and foremost, as I said, we cannot normalize Deandre Ayton's performances this season. I think The takeaway is after his 19-11 tonight, 21-11 tonight in just 26 minutes, mind you, 0 fouls, that I think his baseline is better than we give him credit for. He may not have a pathway because of how great Devin Booker is, because of the way that Chris Paul is still going to have the ball in his hands at times, and the fact that guys like Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson are going to get theirs, and this team's going to want to share the ball. We aren't going to see the 30-20 games every night, right? Like the Bulls game, the Pistons game, the Kings game, just to name a few recently. Like that's not the norm, right? But while we have seen those highs that are one way to show how much Deandre Ayton has elevated his game, I think the consistent night-to-night stuff is potentially just as important. He was at 18-10 in the month of November in 31 minutes per game, 63% shooting from the field. This month in December, this is going into tonight's game, so it doesn't include the 19-11. Let's put that in there loosely. He was at 17-9 heading into tonight's game in 28 minutes per game. So he's only played 7 games in December, so he's probably somewhere around, 18, 19 points and about 9 or 10 rebounds per game now in the month of December on 65% shooting heading into tonight and a 23% usage rate, which was higher than November. I just think it's easy to forget the low lows that we sometimes saw, as recently as October of this season, definitely in previous seasons. And, his averages, rebounding is down a little bit. His scoring is back where you want it to be. He had the foul problems early this season, and then he started to turn it around. We like to evaluate Deandre Ayton, in my opinion, a lot based on the matchup. Is this a small team? Is this a switching team? Can he dominate? Can he do it? And what makes a steady, consistent, good to potentially great player is that you do it every night, right? That's way back in, September, October when I was making predictions. One of my 3 big predictions for the season in one of the shows that I did was Deandre Ayton will make an all-star team. I don't know if he's going to do that. I feel like he's not playing a lot of minutes, partially because of the foul trouble, partially because the Suns have had some blowout wins. He's missed some time on 2 separate occasions already because of the ankle, but he's doing it in terms of consistency. He's upped his free throw attempts. He's getting the double-doubles every night. He's not having these dips in his performance. The shooting percentage is back to where you want it to be. Defense, I think this has been a little bit of a step back for him on the whole defensively this season. I feel like his execution is a little bit worse. I feel like the fouling has been a little bit of a problem. I think you look at the stats on the on-off stuff. When he's off the floor, the Suns' defense has been better, which isn't what you like to see, even though that's been the case in years past as well. But the point is, he had a ho-hum 21-11 tonight, right? It didn't even feel like Deandre Ayton was... In the first quarter, the first couple buckets of the game, he had like a spin move on Thomas Bryant. He had a 3 in the fourth quarter. There were some moments where you noticed he was doing some cool and special stuff, but for the most part, I feel like it was just DA doing what he was supposed to be doing. But what he's supposed to be doing has increased over time. You know what I mean? Chris Paul's not what he used to be. They don't have a backup center that's as reliable as they have in the past. They ask more of Deandre Ayton, and he keeps giving. He keeps doing and executing in terms of his role. And there's something to be said for that. We can't all pile on when he underperforms or when he's inconsistent. And then now that he's been consistent for, a month and a half, 2 months, we got to acknowledge that. It's not just about matchups. It's not just about who's in the lineup, who's not in the lineup. It's not just about offense or defense or rebounding. He's putting it all together. He's doing it almost every single night, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. All right, so told you there would be 2 takeaways. I think this one's a little bit of a fun one, but it's an opportunity on the Lakers side of things on the box score tonight. The obvious guy to focus in on is Dennis Schroeder. And my takeaway from this game is I think the Suns were right to pursue him. I think Suns fans were right to want to get him. heading into tonight's game, Schroeder was at 40% shooting from the field, 9 points, 4 assists, 30% from deep. Just an unspectacular season, right? But tonight reminded us, I think, of what he's capable of. He got to the basket at will. He lived in the paint. He was 12 of 19 from the field. He made both of his threes, so he was 10 of 17 from 2. He only took 2 threes. I'm looking at his shot chart now, and there's a lot of purple, all right? He had 1 miss in the paint today. He was 5 of 6 in the paint. Most of his misses were from mid-range, so we got a couple threes to go in, like I said. He got almost all of his baskets inside, and then he missed some mid-range shots. Like, he is as billed when he plays like that, you know? He's somebody that's going to make his catch-and-shoot threes, potentially get to the line a little bit, distribute and, keep the ball moving, and he's going to score at the basket. And those are qualities the Suns needed, right? Like, we still know that the Suns need those qualities. And so I think it would have been easy to write off this Schroeder season, write off the Lakers. They're not that great. They're injured all the time, etc. I don't know all that goes into Schroeder's thinking. He obviously has a history with the Lakers. I was a little bit surprised to see him pick that team because I think we all knew it would be an uphill battle for them to make the playoffs, make the final. They were not going to make the finals, I should say. And so that confused me a bit. He had his choice of a bunch of different teams. The Suns have that taxpayer mid-level. They could have paid him $6.5 or so million, and he chose the Lakers. But I think this game, his best of the season so far, reminded us, hey, that's a guy who would have checked a lot of boxes for this Suns team. They were right to pursue him. The reporting shows that they did, and that he just chose differently. So it's not a criticism of the Suns, but it is just, hey, this guy might have had a rocky start, but the Suns were on the right track. And maybe that gives you a little bit of hope and optimism that, hey, rather than dumping on James Jones every chance you get online, maybe this guy did know what some of these needs might have been for this Suns team, tried to address them, didn't quite get that job done when it comes to Schroeder. There's plenty more opportunity to do that between now and the trade deadline, and maybe this is a template of what could help solve some of these problems. Let's get to the box score oddity of the game and a quick update when it comes to the bench mob vibe check. We'll dive into all of that in just 1 second. First, today's show, guys, brought to you as well by BetOnline with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, whether you love pro football, the college bowl season, hoops, of course, or even soccer as it gets back into club season with the World Cup finished. If you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. Again, the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. So head to the website today. That's betonline.net, or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Today's show also brought to you by My Solar Nerd. If you live in Arizona, you've had people at the mall, at your house, at your apartment complex clubhouse telling you, hey, we have a deal for you. Free solar. But if you live in Arizona, you also know it's mostly a lie. They're just trying to mislead and overcharge you. But My Solar Nerd, their mission is simple. Help you get the best solar system to fit your needs. The guys at mysolarnerd.com are local, meaning they understand the nuances of going solar here in Arizona, and they believe that an educated customer is a happy customer. Switching to solar, in their eyes, should mean saving you money. So once you're ready, they'll put their industry knowledge to work for you by choosing the best equipment, warranties, and installers in their network. And on the back end, they'll help you figure out all the credits and incentives that you may qualify for and manage the entire project for you from start to finish. Our listeners will get a $50 Amazon gift card when you book a no-commitment evaluation. This promotion only for Locked On listeners who are local and only for homeowners. No solar panels on your apartment complex, unfortunately. But visit mysolarnerd.com and select Locked On if that applies to you, and list Locked On in that How'd You Hear About Us section, all right? Make the switch to solar on your terms and start your research process today by visiting mysolarnerd.com and show Locked On some love by letting them know we sent you. Folks, going solar doesn't need to be complicated, and mysolarnerd.com makes it easy. So we talked about Chris Paul's big night in the first and fourth quarters. We've talked about a Lakers takeaway. We've talked about a Suns takeaway on the Deandre Ayton side of things. Let's quickly hit some of our normal post-game segments. All right, so you know the bench mob vibe check. We'll get to that in just 1 second. I want to start with the box score oddity of the game. All right, the thing in the box score that jumped out to me the most as I went back through it after the game. I'll usually throw on YouTube, watch the highlights of somebody's performance, in this case, Chris Paul, and then I'll look at the box score, and I'll just try to look at it with fresh eyes. What jumped out to me? And in this case, it was the three-point shooting. I do think, quickly, I want to mention one other one is the free throw shooting on the part of Chris Paul. Getting to the line 8 times, and a lot of them were legit fouls. It wasn't just the end of the game, foul game. Obviously, it was a blowout. He was getting to the line. That was nice to see, but we talked about Chris Paul already. The three-point shooting was also a byproduct of Chris Paul, but it applied to many more people as well. All right. I thought the pace was really good in this game. I thought they were able to get a lot of threes just by pushing the pace. You saw Torrey Craig get an assist to Mikal Bridges in the corner at one point. You saw Chris Paul himself spraying it out. You saw Landry Shamet in semi-transition getting some dribble handoff stuff to go, getting some nice, quick trigger shots in that realm. The Suns' stats don't show that they were amazing in transition tonight. They didn't run a lot, but I thought in the three-point department, that was a big part of why they were able to be effective. I think when you zoom in on Torrey Craig and Damian Lee specifically, who were the best shooters tonight, they were 9 of 14 from deep combined. Torrey Craig made all 4 of his threes. It was his birthday tonight. Very cool to have a big game on your birthday, I'm sure. I don't know if that was why he was confident, but either way, they were going in. Those guys, it was much more in the half court. It was Chris Paul, again in that pick and roll mode, spraying it out to Craig. I mean, Craig in the corner, like this, I don't know what the numbers say. They're complicated to pull up, so I won't do that right now. But it feels like if Torrey Craig is in the corner specifically and he's open, it's a pretty good bet to go in. If he's taking them from the wing or the top of the key, or if he's not very open, you start to get a little wiggly with it, right? You're not super confident. But tonight, with Chris playing so well, with the Lakers not playing much defense at all, Craig was able to get into a rhythm and make them. Damian Lee, same thing. I thought it was very smart to put him in the starting lineup when Booker was out. I wish the Suns would have just done that from the jump. When Booker missed games last weekend, they did the Dario Saric thing. I didn't really get it. I don't know. I don't have an answer for you. It didn't make sense to me then. It doesn't make sense to me now, but they fixed it. Damian Lee's the much better option, and he was able to show you why, right? He can handle the ball a bit. He's going to be a ball mover. He's going to play some defense, and he's going to make his open threes. So he did it. The Suns were 20 of 39 from deep, 51%. The Lakers on the other side had a decent night. They didn't generate a lot of them because LeBron and Russ, who are mostly going to be the guys who are kicking out like that, were both obviously inactive, but they made 12 of those 28, and that's 43%. So it wasn't as if the Lakers just fell apart, but the Suns, it's just another area of the game where they were able to dominate. All right, let's close things out with the bench mob vibe check. I talked about Landry Shamet in terms of making some shots tonight. I thought he was one player to highlight. 29 minutes, 4 of 12 from the field, but again, he's a guy where most of his shots are going to come from deep, so you don't read too much into the field goal percentage. He was 3 of 7 from deep, and the Suns were a plus 15 when he was out there. It was a pretty solid game, especially in the third and fourth quarter. The game was out of reach, but I mean, look, the game was out of reach the whole time, so I'm not gonna knock Shamet for playing well in the second half when, look, this thing was a blowout most of the night. The fact is, the reason he played so much, 29 minutes, was the guy who's been taking his minutes, Josh Okogie, got hurt. All right, he played 10 minutes tonight. He apparently hurt his hip in the first half, and the training staff was aware of it. They kind of talked it over. He tried to give it a go in the second half, and it wasn't comfortable. He didn't want to keep pushing it. He wasn't effective, and so he sat most of the second half. I'm not going to sit here and say that that's going to make or break the Suns' fortunes. I think there are certain matchups, though, to be honest, where he really is an impactful player. You saw him defend Zion. You can go back and listen to that show from Monday. But even if I don't think it's going to make or break game by game, the Suns winning or losing, it's a bad break for him, you know. You hope that it's nothing. I don't think it's like severe. Like, he's not going to be missing months for all intents and purposes. He went back out on the court and played. You know, I'm not trying to say it's that, but it just, even if he missed a game or two, it would be a real bummer because he was developing so much momentum for himself to earn playing time, for his rhythm as a shooter, all these different things. Very comfortable looking player. And he was, again, plugging some holes that the Suns really needed. So let's hope it's nothing severe. Let's hope he probably doesn't play tomorrow on a back-to-back, but the Suns have a break until Friday after that. Maybe he plays Friday. Maybe he plays Sunday on Christmas. We don't know. I would love to continue to see him make the most of this season because I feel like he was really onto something and catching on with this team and providing a really cool element that they did not have. So bummer note to end on, but everything else was sunshine and rainbows for the Suns tonight. 130-104 was the final score. Suns beat the Lakers. Back-to-back tomorrow, so I'll be back with you post-game. Suns-Wizards, and probably a bigger test, so a more fun game to talk about. Keep it right here. Hit follow, hit subscribe. Get that show in your feed the minute it goes up. In the meantime, go make Locked On Sports Today your second listen to get caught up on everything going on around the whole world of sports. That show is available wherever you get podcasts, and I will talk to you all tonight.